The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often, he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome again, everyone. I'm Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor and vice president of strategic media and public relations. And in just a minute, I'll be joined by my old friend Dennis Calvert. Dennis is the CEO of BioLargo, which is listed on the OTCQX here in the US under the symbol BLGO, as you see here on the screen. He also was named late last year as an advisor to the U.S. Department of Commerce. Very well deserved accolade for him and for BioLargo both, I believe. And just recently, ahead of this particular discussion, I did another video update with him to chiefly talk about what his role is at the Commerce Department and some of the exciting things going on in the U.S., how we're looking to export more and more in a way of especially environmentally friendly technologies, which he and BioLargo both have got a major hand in, of course, for those who already know the story. If you didn't see that, I'm going to have a link to that particular video along with the notes for this one. So you can go back and watch that and learn more specifically about his role at Commerce. But today we're going to talk more specifically about some news that just came out a few days back from one of BioLargo's subsidiaries, Salinity. Very big news where they passed muster with third-party validation of their energy storage technology. Very, very big development out of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where Salinity is headquartered along with some of the other company's functions. And I want to get into all the nuts and bolts of that and what the next steps are with Dennis. Before I do, on the screen here, of course, as usual, you see the slide from their presentation. Dennis and or myself might be making what are construed as forward-looking statements, so we want to make you aware of that. Good intentions aside and good planning aside, things don't always turn out as or when you might think they're going to, so be mindful of that. And I also need to remind you as well that even though BioLargo is first put in the National Investor as one of my recommendations based on its merits. Our subscribers support the National Investor first and foremost. Companies don't pay to be recommended by me. I recommend companies based on their merits after I do my homework on them, etc. But after the fact, because a lot of companies like BioLargo, like our approach and our audience and whatnot, they will hire us to do added media work and copywriting and things like that, of which this video is a recent example. Now, if you don't already know the story, BioLargo as a company is a name that you may not have heard before, but chances are pretty darn good that you've run across at least one of their inventions, and that is the pet odor removal product called Poof. A lot of people have seen these different commercials in the last couple of years or so, and there's other products now that have come out with some of the same kind of odor fighting technology that another of BioLargo's subsidiaries has created in the past. They've got a major subsidiary with PFAS remediation. This has been a big thing environmentally in the news for a while now, a multi-trillion-dollar potential industry globally to clean up these forever chemicals. And if you go to BioLargo's site and roll up your sleeves, spend some time there, learn about their technology, they're starting to make some inroads here as well. Their Cleara medical division is one that is about to have another breakthrough, I believe. They've had news out recently on it, which I'm talking about in a National Investor right now. But again, for today's purposes, I want to talk about the third-party validation of their battery technology. It's a very unique design. Importantly, as I'm going to let Dennis explain, so you hear it properly, because I might screw it up, but their design is one for energy storage, not dependent on imported raw materials, critical materials that are hard to come by or are being embargoed by China or whatever the case may be. And this is going to be a monstrous industry going forward for years to come. Whether you're talking about solar power, wind power, nuclear energy, small modular reactors within the nuclear energy industry, and a lot of things in between, the need for battery storage, for long-term energy storage, is going up by leaps and bounds. And there's a lot of different technologies out there. Some complement one another, some are in competition with one another. But I think that salinity, and I'll be visiting their Oak Ridge facility, in fact, in the very, very near future. They've got one of the better, more cost-effective, and most easily scaled technologies because of the availability of the inputs and so forth of most anything that's out there. So without further ado, I want to bring on Dennis and have him go over this recent news. All right, and here is my good friend Dennis Calvert back again, not many days after we did a little quick lap around your role at the Commerce Department. Dennis, I'm glad you could join me again.
Chris, good to be here. Good to see you.
Well, you know, it was exactly a year, as I said before you came on, after your first prototype production of the Salinity battery cells, that you got that big news from the 18th, a week ago as we're recording this, and that being the key third-party validation that says,
Right.
yep, this thing does what we say it does. Now you move on to the next steps of added testing and toward commercialization and selling these things into a market where we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, at least for these purposes. You and I have talked about it. Everybody knows it, that the demand for energy of all kinds on this planet is insatiable. It's growing by leaps and bounds. And one of the big additions in recent years is exactly the market that you're looking to break into, and
Right.
that's energy storage. And before we get into the nuances of what this third party report said and its relevance and so forth, which I want you to add
Sure.
some color on. I'll have the link to the press release itself in our show notes here. I want to go back a few years to when you and I were together at a conference in Puerto Rico, and you excitedly were telling me about this technology that you were getting your hands on. And so you were excited telling me about the attributes, the physics, the efficiency, the safety, and everything of a liquid sodium type of battery, which is not necessarily a new thing. They've been around, but not in a big way commercially. And all of a sudden, this was at a time, and after you and I talked, and you were visiting with me about this technology, this the latest appendage to BioLargo's stable of companies and projects, I start doing some homework, and wow, you don't have to look real hard to see that there's a lot of scholarly material out there about how this type of a battery is good. So tell us quick before we get into salinity and the third-party validation about why liquid sodium. What are the reasons that you go that direction for energy storage?
So there's a gap in the market. That's the simple answer. And the gap is batteries that can deliver energy over an extended period of time that are also rugged enough to handle the fluctuations and the demand at a grid scale. And so, and of course, on top of that, safety and then durability, how long it's going to last, so lifespan. But long duration is the trick, okay? And there's a bunch of people racing into that market. There's some notable companies. Tesla, of course, has just recently announced they've got a new aluminum battery. So everybody's racing to be in the game, okay? And it starts with great technology. So we would argue that the salinity battery starts with great technology, and from our release and from our position, we believe the claims are unmatched in the market. Okay, so it's a pretty bold claim. If said another way, some people would say you have a chance to be number one. Okay, now number one technically, you still got some muscling up to do, so we're not ready for all that, but it's coming, and it starts with great technology and a strategy and people, right? So that technology is a winner for a number of reasons. One is it performs at extraordinarily high energy density. Okay, so when you look at we'd call distant cousins in the family of salt batteries, like a sodium sulfur, that's a distant cousin. They operate at extraordinarily low energy density. And so they've had issues getting adoption because of that, also lower voltage. Okay. Also, they run at much higher temp, like 3 times our temperature. Our salt battery runs at molten, so that's hot. It's a hot battery. It likes heat. It can operate in the desert really well. And in cold environments, if you insulate it, it holds the heat in. So as it processes, it can keep itself warm and make sure it is continuing to function, right? But it optimizes around 200 C, okay? Now, the trick in this is that it has no rare earth elements. So no lithium, no cobalt, no nickel. Okay, so what's that mean? That means it's got no supply chain barriers. The ingredients and the components that manufacture this battery are abundant. And by the way, they can all be recycled easily. It's got no toxic brew. It's quite amazing. Okay. So what's special?
Well, that's big all by itself at a time right now when, whether it's because we're concerned about the safety of supplies going forward with all the trade stuff, and then even as President Trump is trying to get things restarted in the U.S., that's going to take years to
It
have
is.
the amount of a lot of these things that we need for lithium ion batteries and things like that. So the fact that you can use stuff, I mean, where do you get the raw materials for this? It's got to be pretty simple.
They're commoditized materials. You can get them anywhere. Stainless steel. We got some low grade stainless steel. We have, of course, sodium chloride,
Right?
right? So there is some sulfur compounds. So we use sulfur. We also have a few other salts that are in abundant supply that we don't really give the recipe on.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you put it all together, the significance is that the claim set for this is extraordinarily superior to other salt batteries in the market. Now there's a big race. In fact, China is really aggressive on what's called sodium ion. Sodium ion. Okay, anytime you hear the word ion, that refers to an ion exchange. It's the way that the electrons transfer across a membrane. And so
Okay.
what happens is there's always these side reactions, and side reactions mean degradation. Our battery has no perceivable internal degradation. And so it operates at extraordinary efficiency. It can go to 100, it can go to 0. We say it's about 94, 95% round trip efficiency. Okay. Most lithium, you get to 80 or you go to 20. You might get 60, 65, 8 to 70% round trip efficiency. And what happens is if you push the envelope on the battery, now here's the point. The grid's going to push the envelope. If you hook this up to the grid and you're hammering the battery, you're hitting it hard and you're pulling fast. That's what happens. Okay. You need it now. You need it quick. You need it over extended period of time. You need to go off grid. It's not just grid, it's also off grid applications like loading renewable energy. You need a durable battery that's chemistry is stable that eliminates these side reactions that call degradation. As you
Okay.
get degradation, you have the potential of sparking and fire. Okay, so our battery doesn't have those issues because we don't have that ion exchange. There's no degradation that's going on. We don't have a dendrite buildup. And so as a result, the key metric is that while all these features are embedded in the battery, we're doing so at extraordinarily high energy density and high voltage. Okay, so all those things come to bear. And when you put them together, you can say nobody can match those claims.
Wow.
It's pretty remarkable.
That
And
is
then
neat.
we've attached a business plan to it, right? That's
Yeah.
another unique feature.
Neat. So the high points, and I'll put it back up on the screen again here, and you can give a little bit more color. The high points of this third-party validation. First of all, the lab that did this, or the entity that did this. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, so that's US Best Corp, US Best
Okay.
Corp. Yeah, so it's a relatively young company, but their specialty focus is on grid scale storage.
Okay.
BESS.
Okay.
BESS stands for Battery Energy Storage System,
Okay.
and they're
Neat
specialists.
enough.
And they've been in the business individually anywhere from 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
So their chief technical specialist is special, and they got it really quick. And I always said, we'd find plenty of people that want to validate the battery. It turns out it's not that easy.
No.
It's not that easy to find the special talent, also with the availability, time, and there's a whole bunch of intersections with US Best Corp that make sense for us, mutual relationships, special knowledge, a willingness. And so we think that's going to be a really strategic relationship for a long time because
Cool.
here's what you learn. The testing never stops.
Yeah.
You're always testing. Why? Well, you want to test it to its breaking limit. You want to take it to where it breaks, and you want to take it to where it's hot and cold, and all these parameters that are going to come at that battery in the field when it's going to be functioning for 20 years.
Hmm.
You want to validate warranty, durability, safety, UL certification, how it interacts with the grid. So what we've accomplished at this stage is the validation of the core cell technology. There's the basic claims have been confirmed, which we've been saying now for a number of years, right?
Yep.
We have third party helping us with that. And it did take us 2.5 years to just reconfirm what the technology is and was, right? Because remember, it had 8 years of R&D before we got involved.
Well, I remember you ticking off the attributes of this thing when you and I first visited about this a few years ago, and here we are.
And it took that time. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this is an important backstory, a short one, and that is when we first acquired it, we knew and believed it all to be true. Okay. So I go out to the market and I say, "Hey, we've got this battery." And they said, "Well, is it all true?" And I say, "Well, we're pretty sure it's true." And people say, "Pretty sure it's not going to do it for me."
No.
And so right. And I say, "Well, pretty sure is all I got for now." And so that took some time and some investment, about 2.5 million bucks, and longer and more money. Okay, but here's the thing: we've done it. We've now replicated the design. We're in the scale up process. We've also done preliminary design on manufacturing, what these factories are going to look like. We've modeled them out to the penny. We know what the capex, we know what the market is, we know how to price it. I mean, there's an extraordinary amount of work done to now position ourselves with partners in a joint venture strategy to go on really global scale adoption. I mean, we're loaded for bear on this.
Well, and importantly too, Dennis, I think we want to remind folks that you are not going into the electric vehicle market.
No, no, much
What you're
different.
looking at is long-term grid storage. All right.
Grid scale.
So
Right,
any externally created energy from whatever, whether it's nuclear, wind, solar, whatever, hydropower,
right.
you people need to be able to store that. And not only is that battery and storage to be used when it's needed, but it's also kind of a governor, isn't it?
Yes.
From the
Well,
original source of
well,
the
there's a couple
energy.
of really critical principles, right? So one is intermittency.
Right.
Intermittency, like renewable energy, like solar. It's only available when the sun's out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to store it at night and arbitrage. The other is whenever you have cheap energy, you want to store it in the battery and then use it when it's expensive so that you arbitrage the price of energy. Okay. And so for big users, that's a number. That's a big number. You can arbitrage, buy it low, use it when it's expensive so you don't tap the grid at high rates. And rates are going up. Okay. And then the other is interacting with the grid. So that's that balancing, buffering, this idea that we become a tool in the toolkit for energy providers using massive grid scale storage to be able to deal with brownouts and blackouts and all this other stuff because when the test is on, people get very nervous, and so we can really become a utility, this utility scale tool that's used to balance the grid, which is also pretty powerful. And that's big business. You're talking about utilities buying our stuff,
Right.
big numbers. Yeah,
Right.
it's fascinating. And then of course you can put it next to a hospital, or you can put it in remote emergency backup systems, and you can make them smaller too. But we think this, especially when you think about our model of forming joint ventures, all of those derivative markets become downstream customization opportunities for our partners who build out assembly factories, who build modules to customize for specific applications. And this is such a good technology. It's probably a great application for even the maritime industry.
Hmm.
Big
Sure.
shipping, big shipping. You don't want to be putting a bunch of lithium batteries in the hull of a ship. Come on, really? Oh, well, there was a big tanker that went down just a few weeks ago,
I
and it
saw
was,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So just think about it. That's $1 billion ship that went down because of a battery and an EV car.
Right.
That's not okay.
No, that's a
Okay.
big loss. So you just alluded to JV partners and that type of thing. Your model going forward now that you've gotten over this big hurdle to demonstrate and have verified by a third party the key attributes to physics, to workability, the function, everything of the Salinity battery that you have. So the next steps are going to be to look for potential manufacturing partners and markets, right?
Yeah, well, we've been doing that already. That's
Right.
good news. And we have a number who've expressed interest in moving forward. I think we've signed 4 MOUs. Now,
Okay.
MOU is an indication of interest, not done deal.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody knows that. A lot of work to do once you get an MOU. It's an agreement of the parties to work towards a goal.
Mhm.
And the number one is financing. So, do they have the financing? Can they get the financing? Because in the business model, we are proposing that we bring technology to bear in a strategy to build a factory that creates local investment, local employment, local export. I mean, this is a model that allows for the goodies to stay home.
Yeah.
Okay, so who wants to be a partner? Well, the people that want all those things: employment, workforce development, grid resiliency, be part of the energy revolution, net export dollars. You're exporting commerce is what you're doing.
Mhm.
And so by taking that community-based approach, the thesis is really a simple principle, right? We want to give more than we receive.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. And so what's happening is people are really gravitating. They go, "Oh my!" And so I was on with a big institutional strategic who says, "We love the model. It can go all over the world fast." I said, "That's exactly what it is. It
Sure.
can go all over the world because we're not capital constrained.
Right.
It just becomes a logistics game. How can you manage?" And the beauty is we get replication. The other thing we've learned is we've got really plowed deep into the concept of preparation for scale is that we're probably going to end up going vertical in the supply of ingredients.
Right. Okay.
It turns out that the volume, because you say, "Hey, we're going to do this," and you think, "Oh, it'll take a decade," and all of a sudden 10 people want to do it. And you're like, "Whoa." And then more coming. And so it's like, okay, this is not a couple of factories. This is dozens, maybe even more. And if
Wow.
that's the case, the ingredients need to be consolidated into a supply chain for the benefit of our joint venture partners. Of course, they're going to love it because we can get to scale that much faster on the supply chain to provide this tools that then go into the factory and actually make every component of the cell at the factory level.
So tell us
People,
real quick, Dennis, before we leave, tell us about how you came to have this part of BioLargo in Oak Ridge. Of course, Oak Ridge, Tennessee is famous in American history for a lot of important technology and inventions. We all know that. And now you're that's where your base of operations is for salinity.
yes, well, and a lot of operations there too. The engineers,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
7 years, almost 8 years ago, we brought in the engineering team. Remember, they had worked at big corporate for a whole
Mhm.
career, multiple acquisitions, IT Corp to Shaw to Chicago Bridge and Iron, CB&I. And so this team of people led by Randall Moore has worked all over the world at some very high profile operations, two, three, $400 million projects, big projects at the highest level, working with, the biggest customers in the world. Okay. And so our good fortune, of course, Chicago Bridge and Iron had a little blow up. And when that happened,
I remember that well.
17,000 people got laid off. I went to Randy and said, "What you going to do?" And he says, "I don't know what you got in mind." I said, "I think we should form our own engineering group." And of course, at that time, we got a lot of criticism. We go back and look at the stock. It pretty much got hammered because we had a team of specialists without desks and computers and no customers. And all of a sudden, we're supporting this team. And really, it got a lot of heat. Of course, now fast forward, they're a centerpiece of the company. Why?
Yep.
Well, because they've been there, done that. They know how to do what most people don't know how to do, and they're very technical, and they know how to get it in and sell it in and support it into the marketplace. So it's an extraordinary skill set now wrapped into a very entrepreneurial, risk-taking venture that's not afraid to step out and say, "Yeah, we can do something dramatic. Absolutely, we can." And so culturally, it's awesome. And I think it as I always say, it gets the engineers out of their cubicle, man. Let's go do something awesome together. So that's number one. And then the invention itself was first created by professors at the University of Tennessee. Well, sound familiar? Tennessee, Oak Ridge, all this.
Yeah.
It's very much a community.
Yeah.
And so one of the co-founders, two of the original inventors had passed away. Very sad story. Brilliant minds. And they'd taken this technology all the way right up to the point of publication, but they didn't publish. And so the secrets were secret. Okay. So the son brought the technology to us and said, "Hey, I think we've got something pretty special." We spent about a year and a half in diligence and we put a little business deal together and said, "Hey, come join us. We're going to figure this thing out and go make it really important and big together." And so one of the cultural things that's very important is we really work hard to honor people,
Mhm.
honor people. Okay. Why is that important? Because people want to work with us.
Yep.
No, it's not perfect, but it's a great place, right? It's a great place where we're doing great work. So that combination, we had to add some staff. The other thing that's amazing is that we can do that incrementally. You said we got to have a building. No, I already got a building. Well, you need some staff. Well, got staff already. Need accounting, done. Legal, done. Right? All those tools that make businesses function are already in place. We needed battery specialists and we needed to get some equipment. We spent $1 million on equipment. Brought in some equipment, started making cells, going through all the trials and errors of, figuring out the design. And we had, here's the thing I always point out, we had the playbook. We had the playbook from 8 years of R&D. It still took us 2.5 years. So when somebody says, oh yeah, we can knock that one off, I think, yeah, good luck. There's so much art in the creation of these. It's extraordinarily technical. And that's a tip off. The patentability, we believe, is robust. And of course, we're hanging on to a lot of secrets and a lot of recipe secrets. And we're not anxious to share them as we advance the intellectual property as we prepare for commercialization. So
Nice. That's
pretty
a
awesome.
great story. And folks, if you're in and around the Oak Ridge area, especially, and you'd like to be able to visit in person with Dennis or a member of his
Sure.
team at Salinity, just be sure you let us know. We'll get you in touch with them. And those of you who aren't in and around that area, you want to learn more, here again is the information on BioLargo on the screen. Contact them, contact us. We're all about networking. And this is another Made in America story. That's what we want these days. That's why Dennis, as I said at the beginning, is working now with the Commerce Department as well, is to get these kind of technologies made in America out there and operational. And again, in this area of energy storage, it's hard to think of too many industries that are going to be bigger than this and grow more than this in importance in the
Yeah.
years ahead.
Well, they're saying it's going to be like 4 trillion, $3 trillion market by 2040. Three
Yeah.
trillion. And so we're going to be a major player there, and it'll morph. I mean, what happens is you find your sweet spot,
Mhm.
you find the right partners, and you narrow, right? You get better and better and better at what you're doing. But this idea of partnering for battery factories around the world, that's a powerful idea.
Yep.
And I believe that we're going to see adoption so much more rapid and without burning our balance sheet. See,
Sure.
that's the key. You're not
Yeah.
going to burn the balance sheet. Most battery companies have spent 200 and $400 million just getting in the
Oh,
game.
yeah.
So we're doing it a little different, and we
And
think
because of that, a lot of them have already flamed out before pay dirt even comes.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so again, we got to start. This is the beauty. We got to start with 10 years of R&D already behind us. Okay, that's a big deal. We didn't burn that equity getting through that journey of discovery.
Right.
Somebody else did. We get to now take the playbook, scale it up, replicate, put a business model behind it, find some partners, get some financing, and go make a magnificent business that, as I say, helps power America. It's pretty
That's
cool.
great. Greatly looking forward to that. Thanks again, Dennis. We'll be catching up again before too much longer.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Take care.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.